Greetings, fellow Romans. My name is Kit. This is Americans Learn. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that ring bell notification. That way, all of you beautiful people are made aware when we upload new content upon our YouTube channel. And today, we have ourselves a continuation of a story. Yes, Julius Caesar and Augustus are gone, but now comes in the reign of the emperors. And it's very important for us to remember that the Roman emperors have for a long time been slandered by barbarian historian critics. So now we're finally, once again, going to get the real story. Shout out to Dovahati. Please be sure to support the original content creator. That link is in the description box below. So please, you hip cool cats, do the right thing. It's the one thing I expect you to do. It's the only thing I expect you to do. And that is support the original content creator. Support the original content creator. Support the original content creator. So, without further ado, since you are a true Roman, time to eat some true Roman bread and enjoy the history of the mad emperors. Or dare I say it, the happy emperors. In a 3, a 2, and an uno.
I was born 75 years ago. For 40 years I have ruled as Rome's emperor. But for all these years I have never been the ruler of my own wife.
Yeah.
I have seen the borders of Germania, beyond which no civilized eye may see. Behold, in chaos, a barbarian sweeps the future.
Curses upon Germania. Justice will come upon Germania. And believe you me, when I play Medieval 2 Total War, when I see the name Holy Rome, and they send their diplomats, I do everything I can to kill those diplomats. And I say to the Holy Roman Emperor, how dare you take the name of that which is far more glorious than you? Oh, I make sure justice happens in Germania, or Holy Rome, as it likes to call itself. No more. No more.
This is the 19th of August, the year of Romulus, 767. These are the closing decades of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and the final seconds of my life.
No. Well, who is that person? Hey, well, peace to you too, fellow Roman. Yes.
Augustus was dead. Having been secretly poisoned by his wife, his remaining relatives mourned him, as she made the preparations for Tiberius' ascension as emperor. That of course included having Postumus executed, and later having Tiberius show up to the Senate, where he was proclaimed the new princeps. He refused most titles and responsibilities they gave him, but as he would find out, the senators were men fit to be slaves. With Tiberius now the emperor, he was faced with revolting legions demanding more pay in Pannonia. To settle that, he sent his son Drusus the Younger, alongside the Praetorian prefect, Sejanus.
You know, I can't help but look at Sejanus, not as that character, but as the one portrayed by Patrick Stewart from I, Claudius. I, Claudius was the Game of Thrones of its era. And, you know, seeing Patrick Stewart as the evil captain of the guard, Sejanus, let's just say I wasn't prepared to see evil Patrick Stewart, but it's okay. It's okay. I would have preferred more of an evil Patrick Stewart, like, you know, angry eyebrows, but okay.
Both of whom hated each other. But then the legions in the Rhine also mutinied, so Tiberius sent Germanicus to them. Yes. Seeking to live up to his father and avenge the betrayal at Teutoburg, Germanicus calmed the mutineers through his endless charisma, paying their salaries out of his own pocket, and promising that anything they looted in their hunt for Arminius would be theirs to keep.
Yes.
Germanicus then crossed the Rhine with his legions,
All right, look at those cliche ladies too. I love. See, Germanicus, that's why you're the man.
sacking the Germans in a righteous punitive campaign, taking Arminius' wife as prisoner and recovering the 19th Legion's Eagle Standard. He then slaughtered his way into the Teutoburg forest, witnessing the purest essence of Germanic barbarity. Desecrated bodies, guts spilled over trees, remains of life sacrificial burnings, chaotic evil at its worst.
Never trust a Germanian. Never trust a Germanian!
He had his men bury the dead and honor their memory. Only then
Oh no. Marcus Pulo, son of Titus Pulo. Gaius Varenus, son of Pulo.
returning to the campaign. Enraged, he attacked the Cherusci heartland, crushing Arminius at the Battle of the Weser River, and then honoring Tiberius by building a mount with the Germanic weapons captured, which triggered Arminius so much that he attacked again, and again Germanicus crushed him, then building an even bigger mount.
Alright, look at those ladies there too. Yeah, who are they?
Honoring Tiberius, Mars, Jupiter, and Augustus. Germanicus then sailed back to Gaul through the North Sea, getting suddenly struck by a storm conjured by Neptune. But not only did Germanicus survive, but he personally rescued hundreds of soldiers by dragging them to the coast. And to end the campaign in good taste, he again raided Germania, annihilating the Marsi tribe and recovering yet another Eagle Standard. If you still don't love the guy, allow me to quote Tacitus. Germanicus did not want any prisoners, as the extermination of the Germanic tribes was the only conclusion he saw for the war.
Perfect.
Fucking based.
Yes, love it.
And Arminius? Backstabbed by his own tribesmen. A treacherous death for a treacherous germ.
No, we should have dragged him to Rome and given him a public execution or a strangling. Or either that having his skin peeled off 1 inch at a time. Or you know what? We'll chain him up to a big tub that's surrounded by Roman guards. And pour milk in it, so he's in there. And honey on his face. Now some of you might be wondering, gee, Kit, are you just going to give him a milk bath? Well, sooner or later he's going to have to take a dump and go to the bathroom. And as that milk starts to get warm and stinks and starts to, become cottage cheese, and as more of Arminius' own bodily fluid gets put in there, it's going to start to itch, and the maggots and the flies and the rats will start feasting on him. That's how you deal with a Germanian. There's only one way to handle barbarians. Through absolute brutality.
As Germanicus returned to Rome to celebrate his triumph, he was followed by his wife, Agrippina the Elder, together with his 5.5 children, among them Gaius Julius Caesar, named after his great-great-great-great-uncle, dressed by his mother with a pair of small soldier boots, forever gaining him the nickname Caligula.
Caligula. The earth will love you.
Also, Claudius, Caligula's uncle, had just recently married.
Claudius. Claudius, the unsung hero. I have a little soft spot for Claudius.
To a woman that would later cuck him. Such was life for Uncle Claudius. The only other one not having a good time was Livia, whom feared that Germanicus' popularity would eventually allow him to overthrow Tiberius.
Livia. Poisonous queen. Hey, you know something? You want to hear a joke? A snake bit Livia once, and it died. For those who know what I'm referencing, I love you. If you know what I'm referencing, I love you. A snake bit Livia once. It died. It died.
Even though he was extremely loyal. But hey, since when has that stopped Livia before?
Nope.
And so she began bitching at Tiberius to have Germanicus withdrawn from the Rhine legions. And to shut her up, Tiberius gave his nephew command over the eastern half of the empire, which was even worse. So Livia sent her servant, Gnaeus Piso,
Piso.
along with him, just to make his life a living hell. He would cancel his orders, counter his opinions, unmake his reforms, and not even when visiting the ruins of Troy was he safe from his bullshit. So Germanicus departed to Egypt to get away from Piso, which Livia took as the last straw. And so, having also partaken of the divine Julian semen, she used her own black magic to conjure a poison for Piso, who then put it in Germanicus' food. Before long, Germanicus fell deathly ill, and died in front of his family, striking his wife with as much sorrow as it did anger. She immediately filed for Piso to be prosecuted for murder, thinking that Tiberius was behind this. The Senate happily obliged, condemning Piso to death. And before he could snitch on Livia, she hastened his execution. And just as things were getting bloody, Claudius asked Tiberius to let him start the cursus honorum, but Livia made him forbid it.
Ugh, Livia. Lost your stutter now, too. Wine has made you bold. Oh, Claudius, I wish to be a god.
He had once tried writing a history of the civil wars, and it really put Livia in a bad light, so she kept making his life miserable. The reality.
And there's Tiberius. Wasn't worth it. Even I could have told you that.
Tiberius was trapped between his mother's dictatorship and the Senate's incompetency, so he began relying on Sejanus more and more, whom used this to further his ambition to one day become emperor. And with the new heir, Drusus, hating him so much, Sejanus seduced his wife, Livilla, to
Livilla. Livilla. You're also the one that set up Posthumus. But by the way, if you read the book, I, Claudius, there's a scene in there where apparently a person named Posthumus is set before Emperor Tiberius. And Tiberius asks this person, who is apparently Posthumus in the book, Tiberius says to Posthumus, "How did you become Posthumus?" To which this person, Posthumus, replied, "The same way you became Emperor of Rome."
To conspire together with him. Convinced, Livilla had her husband poisoned, and with his death, Sejanus asked Tiberius to marry Livilla. Easy to say Tiberius refused. So Sejanus settled with pressuring Claudius to marry his relative, Aelia, whom would endlessly physically abuse him.
Ugh, God, Aelia. That one. I'm your wife! You must protect me!
Such was life for Uncle Claudius. Tiberius then considered Claudius as his new heir, but he backed off fearing Sejanus' wrath.
Good.
Struck with grief and endless paperwork, Tiberius let Sejanus bear almost all tasks of state, secluding himself to the island of Capri, while Livia and Sejanus used his authority to either expel or execute anyone they wanted. Livia made sure to kill as many innocents as possible before her time came, secretly advising Sejanus to get rid of Agrippina and her children for Tiberius' sake.
Claudius, I wish to be a god. You are a little monster, aren't you, Caligula? You little monster. These are deleted verses of the Sibylline prophecy that says one day you, Claudius, will be emperor of Rome. If I can become emperor of Rome, you surely will become the queen of heaven. Hi, Claudius. It was a work of art.
Which he heeded for his own sake. One night, as the imperial family had dinner, Tiberius offered Agrippina some fruit, but she viciously refused, suspecting poison. Sejanus then used this as an excuse to accuse Agrippina of misbehavior, and her eldest son Nero of sexual degeneracy, banishing them both, and later her other son Drusus as well. The three of them will later be either beaten to death, starved to death, or in Agrippina's case, both. And since we're talking violence, some Jew with god delusions just got crucified in Judea. From here on, his followers would increasingly infest the empire with their sacrilege against the divine Caesars and overall Christ cuckery.
They're probably not important. What's a town called what? Bethlehem. Oh, Bethlehem. Never heard of it. Why? Is it something important? No, seriously. Inquiring minds want to know. Did something happen? Like, who is this guy? Never heard of him. Never heard of him.
There's something to all this, but that's for way later. And now, with most of his family now dead, Caligula and his sisters were invited to join Tiberius in Capri, alongside Gemellus, Drusus' son with Livilla, whom Tiberius wished to have co-rule the empire with him, later marrying Caligula's sisters off one by one, and later him to a girl named Junia, whom died in childbirth, so whatever. Caligula blamed Tiberius for his relatives' deaths, but whenever he prepared to stab him in his sleep, the ghost of Augustus would appear, and discourage him from such a dishonorable act. Back in Rome, Sejanus had become so powerful he was the de facto emperor. He had his enemies or anyone really executed without end, had his birthday celebrated as if he was part of the imperial family, and even schemed with Livilla to ally with the surviving Julians and overthrow Tiberius, making him the regent of both Gemellus and Caligula, whom he would later betray. But even Tiberius had his limits. He might not care how many senators Sejanus kills.
Oh, there's Tiberius's astrologer. It's rather quite determined. Do you know your exact? Hold on, wait. I wish to know how long I must deal with my mother. Why don't you pull up her astrology? Oh, it's rather a bad year for her sign. She's a Leo. I'll see what I can do. If I don't get the exact time or date of her birth, I could be off by maybe a year. I mean, I'll get to it right away.
But threatening him and his heirs was enough. Sejanus was then called onto the Senate, where he was denounced and tried guilty of treason, with his lover Livilla being ousted as well. Sejanus would be strangled to death, and Livilla imprisoned by her mother Antonia, whom had her starved to death. But Tiberius' lack of will to rule the empire was indeed troublesome. So one night, as he slept, Caligula gently had him suffocated with his own bed sheets, at the bold age of 77, a far more graceful way to kill an emperor. And with his great uncle now dead, Caligula was a...
And now, bring it up for the one, the only Caligula. The earth will love you. If I ever get the money to ever become a film director, I will make a movie based on Caligula that'll be unbiased. It'll be titled Caligula. The world loves you.
Claimed the new emperor, later denying Gemellus of his inheritance. That kid had gone insane over the years, and Caligula knew the last thing Rome needed right now was a madman as emperor.
That's right.
Later having the crazy kid executed. His grandma Antonia literally killed herself over this, but oh well. Caligula was then received into Rome, cheered by the crowds as the son of the great Germanicus, leading to over 160,000 animals being sacrificed in his honor. During the first few months of his reign, he threw all of Sejanus' old treason trial documents into the fire, pardoned countless exiles and prisoners, reduced taxes to unprecedented lows, upped the soldiers' pay dramatically, and threw several games and parties in honor of his dead family members, whose remains he had recalled to Rome, and buried alongside Augustus in his mausoleum. By then, his uncle Claudius had just finished the history of the Etruscans and Carthaginians, so Caligula celebrated it by making him consul with him, mixing him up into crazy culture.
That's right. Way to look out for your Uncle Claudius. Be nice to your Uncle Claudius, for he is a phenomenon. He's so old-fashioned that he swore to protect his brother's children, and that means you can never harm him. Caligula and Claudius, 100 years forever. 100 years forever, 100 seasons. Caligula and Claudius. Those two.
To the cost of fortune, all for the sake of banter. But as he worked his way into the hearts of every Roman, Caligula was struck with a devastating illness. Forced into his bed, he suffered immensely. Caligula was struck with a devastating illness. Forced into his bed, he suffered...
I think that's a savior. The savior of the world. The one that was prophesized. Oh, Caligula, you gotta warn the world.
Immensely, after having prophetic visions of the future and losing consciousness. When he finally woke up, Caligula had realized the truth. He had become a god. Embracing his duty to act as a god, Caligula started a harem around his own sisters, especially Drusilla, whom he treated in all ways as his wife, despite the fact that she was married to the great-grandnephew of Lepidus. To match his divine status, the gods inflicted on Drusilla the same illness that afflicted Caligula, but she couldn't...
What happened? The prophecy! Tell us!
...survive the divination process. In order to channel his grief and anger in a constructive manner, Caligula followed on his father's steps and marched his legions beyond the Rhine. There he would crush only one Germanic horde. All in all, his father's previous campaigns had really devastated the area, thank the gods.
Yes.
So instead, he set his eyes on Britannia. But to successfully invade, he would have to face Neptune, the god whose ocean storms had greatly troubled both Caesar and his father's campaigns. Standing god to god, Caligula confronted Neptune on a one-on-one combat for the fate of Britannia. The writings detailing this divine conflict have been lost to time. All we know was that after a long struggle, Caligula had emerged victorious, and then plundered Neptune's precious seashells as victory spoils. Having taken too much damage, Caligula postponed the invasion of Britannia. Good thing too, as he just then learned that his friend Lepidus had been plotting against him, all while banging both of his sisters Agrippina the Younger and Julia Livilla. Ashamed at being related to such adulterers, he banished them both, then had Lepidus killed. Later returning to attend a wedding hosted by Gaius Piso, whose wife he took a liking to, so he took her right then and there, openly telling Piso what felt like taking her virginity. Then he grew bored and divorced her the next day, doing her a favor and forbidding her from marrying Piso. That guy was trouble and everyone knew it. Caligula then experimented by marrying Lollia, but he wasn't into that pedo stuff. So, as a god of divine taste, Caligula married a big-tittied MILF named Caesonia.
Oh my goodness, Caesonia, what the... Well, you're carrying a lot of milk there.
whom he showed openly naked to his friends, casually threatened to kill, and conceived a child with her, named after his late sister. He then came to understand his true nature as a new god, a new Jupiter, and yes, as Neo's Helios, the new sun. Then started to cut off the heads of statues and substitute them with his own, ordering many temples to be built in his honor, and in time began to treat the disgusting mortals he was surrounded with as they deserved. As Caligula traveled in his carriage, he forced the senators to run alongside him, punishing those who couldn't keep up. Once, as he watched the gladiatorial matches and they ran out of gladiators, he used his powers to throw an entire section of the pleb audience into the arena to be eaten by the lions, so he wouldn't get bored. Whenever he needed money, he sent agents to rich citizens' houses to be executed and their property confiscated, never bothering to come up with some faggot-ass excuse to justify his divine whim. As he watched his prisoners being tortured and screamed for mercy, he would have their tongues cut off to enjoy the execution in peace, telling the torturers to make them feel like they're dying. One day, he had the entire Roman fleet align in a tight single-file formation alongside the Portus Iulius Bay, crossing it on horseback just to prove Tiberius' old astrologer wrong. Yes. One night, as he received the Client King of Mauritania for dinner, he suddenly realized the whole concept of Client Kings was gay, so he had him killed, and his kingdom annexed into the empire, later sending the legate Paulinus to crush any provincial revolts there, something he would become an expert on. And once the Jews started complaining at Caligula's statues being
Oh boy, here we go.
Placed in their synagogues, he ordered that a statue of himself be placed on the Temple of Jerusalem itself, renaming it as Temple of Illustrious Gaius, the new Jupiter. As he returned his attention to the Senate, seeing the sheer stupidity and incompetence the senators displayed, for the good of Rome, Caligula appointed his horse as consul, who proved to be smarter than the whole Senate put together, and with Rome now in his horse's capable hoofs, Caligula prepared to move to Alexandria, where he hoped to further understand his divinity. But just as his unrivaled banters and godly virtues made him popular with the plebs, so had he driven his enemies to the edge of envy and resentment. They were revolted by the existence of someone so divine, even more so one whom they owed their souls to. Unable to bear the thought of Caligula returning to Rome more powerful once more, a conspiracy was born, led by a senator named Cassius, with Carrera being his last name, Cassius Carrera. The thing with Carrera was that, as a Praetorian guard, he couldn't stand being a constant target for jokes, being the feminine-voiced, balls-chopped manlet that he was. So one day, as Caligula addressed some actors during a festival in honor of Augustus, Carrera and two others ganged up on him, stabbing him to death. No! You could say that he lived up to his name right to the end, and beyond it as well. But killing the God Emperor, as far as that is possible, wasn't enough. No, he had to invade the Imperial Palace and kill every single member of the Imperial family he could find, including Caesonia and their infant child, whom he had thrown at the wall and its skull crushed. Such is the wrath of ugly feminine incels. But as the loyal elements in the Praetorian Guard showed up, they eventually found Claudius hiding from Carrera behind a curtain. Then they all turned to him and proclaimed him their new emperor.
No, I believe in the Republic. You're not a prisoner, you're emperor. Hey, come on, lads, this is Germanicus' lame old brother. You see, the lads are kind of upset because they don't have an emperor. Well, why can't we have him as an emperor? What? Oh, Claudius? Yeah, hey, yeah! Hey, this guy wants a republic. Don't make me laugh. Hey, lads, we found an emperor! Long live the Emperor Claudius!
As Claudius met with the Senate, he graciously pardoned all conspirators, except Carrera, who he had executed. So yeah, Claudius is emperor now. Funny that. You wouldn't expect someone whom Livia had raised by an abusive ex-mule driver to end up anywhere in life. But here we are. Knowing that his best strategy would be to imitate Augustus as much as possible, Claudius renamed himself after the original princeps, which would become common practice. To start off in a good light, he exempted the ruins of Troy from taxation and affirmed the rights of Jews to... Let's hope that works out. He also built a ton
All right, Claudius, show him how it's done.
of shit. Aqueducts, roads, the works. One of his big projects was to try and drain the Fucine Lake, but the drainage pipe backed up and submerged the entire effort. A humiliating affair, but such was life for Uncle Claudius. Claudius then assumed the office of censor alongside Lucius Vitellius, the father of Aulus Vitellius, a really fat cunt, remember that, using his office to purge all of his enemies from the Senate. And yeah, Claudius had enemies. Mostly senators as blasted at how he had welcomed even more civilized Gauls into the Senate than Caesar once did, killing some 35 senators and 300 equestrians in total. It's no real purge, but hey, it's a start.
Yeah, come on, hey, listen, He's trying to be reasonable with the Senate, but obviously the Senate's got its own plans.
To help him rule, Claudius had some freedmen as advisors, among them Narcissus, his most trusted subordinate, with whom he sought to consolidate the empire. That is, annexing as many Clyde kingdoms as possible, among them Thrace. There, now we can call it Mare Nostrum.
Oh, look at it. Look at that beautiful map. No rival countries, no client kingdoms, no city-states, no Etruscans, no Samites, no Gauls. Only problem is Germania. But everything else looks pretty nice. I mean, look at that. That is civilization right there, folks. Let's enjoy it for there. Just for 1 minute. Well done, Claudius. Well done. Emperor after all.
And to exploit the fact Caligula had cleared the way of Neptune, Claudius set his eyes on Britannia. As it happens, one of the Briton client tribes Julius Caesar had set up had its king deposed, so Claudius sent 4 legions there to reassert Roman influence.
Yes.
The path cleared, Claudius arrived with war elephants, founding Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, as the new capital of the province. Among Claudius's legates was a one named Vespasian.
Oh yeah, that boy, the guy you have a beer with. Yeah, Vespasian, my man, my ace in the hole, my dog, Vespasian, and his boy Titus,
whose swift conquest of the western British coast would gain him much fame. Victorious, Claudius personally pardoned one of the defeated Briton tribe leaders, Caradocus, permitting him to live in Rome, where he would become so civilized.
Look at that. That is civilized artwork right there. Those are beautiful Roman centurion women. True Roman women who know how to bake true Roman bread and serve true Roman wine to their true Roman husbands. I wish I could find somebody like that. Someday. Just not today.
He questioned why the Romans ever bothered conquering the mud hut from his homeland in the first place. Claudius then had a new son, naming him Britannicus, whom he sired with his third wife Messalina.
Messalina. She's the dirtiest of them all.
Man, if you think Julia the Elder was a whore, Messalina was a nymphomaniac through and through. She fucked all men she could manage to hide from Claudius, born high and low. She once personally challenged the greatest prostitute in Rome for getting fucked by the most dicks in one night, and she won effortlessly. But besides being a degenerate adulterer, she was also a cruel hypocrite. For once she saw Claudius was welcoming Caligula's sisters back from exile, she had one of them, Julia Livilla, exiled and later killed for sleeping around with Seneca. Yes, the Seneca. But that still left Agrippina around, together with her son Lucius, a descendant of Antonia Major. Remember her?
Yeah.
The other baby Octavia was holding? Yeah. Details. But despite her mother's and grandmother's efforts, Agrippina took much more after Livia.
No!
From whom she learned
Livia. Snake better once and it died.
all about how a Roman viper should get ahead in life. So to restore her previous status and wealth, she tried to seduce the governor of Hispania, a one named Galba. But she was rejected on the spot. He was blunt like that. Nevertheless, Messalina was getting real jelly at the popularity the Julians had with the people. And since Claudius would never have them disposed of, she came up with her own plan. First, she would wait until Claudius got out of Rome. Then she would marry one of her lovers in plain daylight with hundreds of witnesses, and then have...
Oh, hey! There are legionnaires coming over the hill! Bring them in! We offer food and wine! No, I think not. Their swords are drawn. Everybody! The Praetorian Guard has come for us! Run!
Claudius killed and have her husband take over the empire. Somehow. Astounded at her stupidity, Narcissus contacted Claudius, telling him of the whole thing. And while the emperor hesitated to punish her, Narcissus just sent the Praetorian Guards to make her kill herself. But Messalina, being a woman, really sucked at suicide, so the guards stabbed her to death. Claudius now had to choose his fourth wife, and given his options, he chose to marry his niece Agrippina, thus reuniting the Julian and Claudian houses. And after endless requests by Agrippina, Claudius disowned his son Britannicus in favor of Lucius, whom, as his new heir, would have his name changed to Nero. I love this part. And to ensure his future ascension, Agrippina had all of Messalina's old allies who might support Britannicus over Nero exiled, even killing Britannicus' tutor after he started to criticize his abandonment. And finally clashing with Narcissus, whom favored Britannicus over Nero, having him exiled to Campania. As his new heir, Claudius had Nero marry his daughter Claudia Octavia, and then recalled Seneca to serve as his tutor. But in time, Claudius began to regret his decision. For his whole life, he had been the target of jokes and manipulation by those around him. But no more. He wouldn't let his wife manipulate him for her own purposes anymore. He would have his biological son be the heir, and there was no—
They think I'm dead. You are dead, you fool. Now it's time to go to the boatman. You cannot pull it off any longer. You cannot hesitate any longer. What's going to happen? A different dream altogether. Rest in peace, Emperor Claudius. Rest in peace.
Truly, a disciple of Livia we have here.
Ugh.
Agrippina then had Narcissus imprisoned and killed, later introducing her new emperor of a teenager to the Senate. But if what Agrippina intended was to make her son a puppet of her means, then she was beyond delusional. Even as just a 16-year-old, Nero lived up to his Julian bloodline, asserting his will over others. Firstly by scorning his marriage to that flat-chested Claudia, then by openly fucking a freed woman just to show that he could, then simply ignoring everything his mother told him, letting his wise advisors like Seneca do the talking. Left out in the cold, Agrippina sought to betray her own son, and so started shooting for Britannicus to be seen as the rightful heir to Claudius. I'm not making this up. She actually went to Nero one day and outright confessed she had killed Claudius to make him emperor, and threatened to snitch to the Praetorian Guard and make them acclaim Britannicus as the rightful emperor. And so, just to spite her, Nero had Britannicus poisoned in front of his sister Claudia, then banished Agrippina for being such a cunt, but that would prove not to be enough. Nero tried to get Agrippina poisoned 3 times, but she was even more resistant than Mithridates. He once tried to collapse the ceiling on top of her, but she got away just in time. Then he tried sinking the ship she was in, only for her to swim to safety to the nearest island. So Nero, having run out of patience, just had a guard stab her to death. It worked, true, but he would forever be haunted by her
Oh, God, if you thought Dido's curse was bad, she must have been worse.
angry spirit. But in the big picture, Nero's regime would be tested right away in the first year, with the Parthian king invading Armenia once again and installing his brother as king. To answer this aggression, Nero sent the general Corbulo to the east, whom, thanks to Parthia being overrun by rebels, proceeded to obliterate all enemies he found and retaking Armenia. He then returned to Rome to celebrate a triumph, leaving his armies to his legate Pietus, whom was then defeated and badly humiliated by the Parthians. Analyzing the situation, and frankly not caring much about the Armenian shithole anyway, Nero allowed the Parthians to pick the Armenian king, but first he would be forced to suck the Roman emperor's cock for approval. Some payback for Pietus. Back to his private life, Nero finally resolved to divorce the infertile Claudia, later having her killed. He then married one of his
Oh, Claudia. Farewell.
mistresses, Poppaea, whom had just divorced his friend Otho, so he made him governor of Lusitania as compensation, so he would fuck off somewhere far away. Poppaea would then bear him a child, but it was a girl, named Claudia no less. Good thing she didn't survive infancy. But as far as ruling the empire went, Nero was of one mind with Claudius and Caligula, so he had a client kingdom of Bosphorus directly annexed into the empire.
Good.
Later, Paulinus would be elected to govern the province of Britannia, accompanied by his Gallo-Roman disciple, Agricola. So yes, back to that god-forsaken island. Ever since Claudius' invasion, subsequent governors had extended its borders north, thus subjugating the Iceni, whose deceased king had willed its land to both his daughters and the Emperor Nero. The Romans then came to collect their inheritance, and after seeing just how badly polluted
Holy cow. That gene pool needs to be fixed immediately.
the British gene pool was, the Romans saw as their duty to impregnate as many women as possible with their virile Roman seed, so that future generations wouldn't suffer as much. But denied the privilege was the Iceni queen, Boudica, whom couldn't cope with her daughters getting all the fun. Enraged and beyond jelly, Boudica rallied the local tribes to revolt against the Romans.
Ah, great. Boudica. Boudica. Oy, oy, oy.
Being elected their warrior queen, and setting off to destroy the civilization the Romans had brought with them. By then, Paulinus was governing the province, and conducting a campaign in Wales. But when he received news from the east, he called on one of his legates to join up with him. But the fucker just refused, cowering away from the revolt.
Coward!
Deprived of reinforcements, Paulinus was forced to make do with the overall 10k men he could muster, against the 230k Britons under Boudica. With a rage to rival Dido, Boudica razed every city she got to, including Camuledunum, Verulanium, and Londinium.
Londinium. Sounds familiar.
With Paulinus rescuing as many civilized refugees as he could. As he was pursued north, Paulinus halted the march, sending the refugees ahead, and choosing to die fighting. After withstanding the Briton hordes for hours, Paulinus, the absolute madman, had his men form up into several wedge formations and charging at the Britons, killing tens of thousands of barbarians in a non-stop bloodbath. Even completely surrounded, Paulinus crushed all resistance. Terrified, the Britons began to flee, clogging up in their carriages like the retards they were, and slowly getting themselves all slaughtered.
Take that, Boudica.
At the end of the day, 80,000 barbarians lay dead at Paulinus' feet, having lost only 400 men, and later making Boudica kill herself. After the battle, Paulinus would engage in such a vicious punitive campaign that Nero had to transfer him away from Britannia, leaving Britannia in his disciples' hands. So let's see how Rome's doing right now. And it's burning, badly, everywhere. The Romans tried
Don't look at Rome burning.
their best to put out the fires, but after calming it a bit after 6 days, it reignited and burned for another 3. As the flames raged, 2/3 of the Eternal City lay in ruins, countless killed, and many more displaced and homeless. Once Nero heard of this strategy, he diverted most of his own personal fortunes to assist the survivors, but that didn't save him from the slanderous accusations. Once the fires finally calmed down, Nero was left wondering, just who could have started the fire? Who could have killed countless thousands for their own aims? Who could have put the capital of pagan civilization to the torch? Who could have... It was the fucking Christians, wasn't it? Ever since the end of Tiberius' reign, that Eastern cult began spreading like a virus through the empire, dissuading the plebs from the ways of Jupiter and the divine Caesars with their monotheism. Such blasphemy was beyond the pale for Nero. He would do everything in his power to save Rome from the Christ-cuck menace. Starting the first persecution of the Christians, Nero chose to fight fire with fire, having the Christians crucified and then burned alive, using them as torches for his parties at night and as decorative posts for his gladiatorial games by day, throwing even more Christians into the arena, letting them be eaten alive by the lions. During his persecutions, Nero would have St. Peter killed, and instigating such fear in the hearts of his victims, a millennia of butthurt Christ-cuck writers would come up with every possible childish slander they could think up about him. And thus, the first revisionist historians were born. So
Oh my goodness, how could they do this to Nero?
many Christian parasites Nero would have killed that he would forever be acclaimed as the Antichrist, given the number 666, gotten from the summation of his name when translated to Jewish numbers. And while torturing Christians is fun and all, Nero was far more athletically minded, holding periodic Olympic Games for contests in chariot racing, singing, and acting, winning every single competition, every single time. He was also architecturally gifted, erecting a giant 120 feet colossus of himself at the heart of Rome. It would proudly stand there overlooking the city, until the... I don't want to talk about it. Such was Nero's skill and dedication to the Olympic Games he held. His wife wouldn't stop berating at him for spending so much time on them. One day, as she wouldn't stop screaming, he kicked her pregnant belly in a fit of anger, killing both her and his unborn child. But even then, she still didn't shut the fuck up. And despite being such a great emperor, Nero, just like every other emperor, would be the target of a conspiracy, masterminded by Gaius Piso. I fucking told you he was trouble. Delusionally seeing himself as a more worthy ruler, Piso started to gather support for a coup with broad support among the Senate, equestrians, and yes, the Praetorian Guard, growing more corrupt by the day. But it would all go down the drain thanks to a freed woman, as she tried to enlist an officer into the plot, but he stayed loyal to the emperor, and then ousted the conspiracy to him, testified by a senator named Nerva. Nero would then have the freed woman tortured, Piso executed, and Seneca, having been an accomplice on the whole thing, was forcefully suicided. His works on Stoicism would still be respected though. By whom? Well, let us say that Nerva is but one of a very distinct group. To calm himself down, Nero had a friend of his kill himself so he could marry his wife, but she didn't prove to be enough. So Nero, as a man of patrician taste, he also married one of his twin servants, named Sporus, dressing him in emperor's clothes.
Oh, good old Tom and Greg. Tom and Greg from Succession.
Putting makeup on him, and best of all, having him castrated. It's not like he would use anything but his boy pussy anyways. He wasn't offended. But as they celebrated their honeymoon, Nero received word of trouble brewing in Judea. So okay, what are the Jews up to now?
What happened?
As always, it all came down to shekels, as Nero's high taxation was triggering the Semites to no end, and as they refused to pay up, the Roman governor of the province was forced to break into the Second Temple and take all of the withheld tax revenue. Their great temple desecrated, and above all their shekels taken, the Jews threw a great revolt, slaughtering all Romans they could find and ambushing an entire legion to its death. To deal with the Jews, Nero sent Vespasian east, alongside his eldest son Titus. But the Jews weren't the only ones complaining about taxation, among them being a Gallic governor named Vindex, whom also revolted against Nero. Not for his own sake though, but in the name of Galba, then governor of Hispania Tarraconensis. With such treason in display, Nero sent the legate Verginius to crush Vindex's revolt. His men then proclaimed him the emperor, but Verginius refused, staying loyal to a fault. But such loyalty wasn't shared by Nero's Praetorian Guard, whom proclaimed for Galba and then abandoned him during the night. Left all alone, Nero contemplated suicide. But with his wife by his side, Nero chose to persist. As they fled to Ostia, seeking to exile themselves somewhere far away, the sailors also betrayed him, denying their service. Nero then contemplated his options and chose to flee to a friend's Italian villa. There, they would have them dig up a grave for him, lamenting how the world would be deprived of his majestic artistic talent, crying out the name of his lifelong love, Sporus. It didn't take long until the news of the Senate's betrayal arrived, whom proclaimed him a public enemy. As he heard the cavalry's approach, Nero refused to let his glorious dynasty end in such disgrace. As the soldiers arrived, they found the emperor bleeding to death on the floor. Some Praetorians had remained loyal and tried to drag him out, saving him from death, but Nero dismissed their attempts, whispering, "Too late. This is fidelity."
No.
The dynasty is shattered. Nero is dead. With the Senate and the Praetorian Guard, they have sealed the lineage of divine Caesars forever.
No.
The last of the Julio-Claudians passes now into history. Nero goes gladly, for he knows his death is not in vain. He takes his place with his great-uncle and his great-uncle's uncle. The early principate has ended. When the next dynasty rises, you shall be its witness. The shape of the future, the fate of the empire. These things, now, belong to me. Ciao ciao.
Ciao, ciao, indeed. Centurion-Chan, why? Oh, how beautiful they are. So, it might look like hope is lost. But as we saw through Caligula, and yes, through his wife, his sister, her vision as well, there is somebody named Aurelian. Dare I say it, there might be still hope. Hope in the unseen. Hope that there might be a hero to step up and save the day. We must do the right thing. Society must stand together as one, for there is a hero. I think his name is Aurelian, but his story is yet to be told. Until then, you outstanding true Romans, we witness the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. There will never be others like them ever again. Hail Rome, and death to the barbarians.